Hi, this is Chuck Braverman. This is another episode of Westdock Online. Today we have a fabulous series that's currently running on Netflix called Full Swing, and we're going to meet one of the producers of the show. But before we do that, I want to remind you, as I'm sure you've heard before, that we're brought to you in part by Real Screen. Real Screen Summit is coming up in Dana Point, California, June 6th through the 8th. I've been going to the Real Screen Summits all over the country for literally 20 years, and it's a great place to meet filmmakers and buyers and sellers and wannabes and superstars and everybody else that's in the business. So mark it down in your calendar. On our website, westdockonline.com, you go down to the bottom, there is an icon there for Real Screen. Just click on it, it'll take you right to their website. So today we are speaking with Paul Martin, who is the producer of Full Swing. Hey, Paul, how are you?
Good, Chuck. Good.
Where are you speaking from, may I ask?
I'm speaking from Los Angeles, actually, although you wouldn't guess from my accent. But yeah, just moved out to the West Coast and enjoying it a lot.
You're obviously from over the pond somewhere, right?
Yeah, so initially from the UK, lived most of my time over there in London, but now Angelino, I guess.
I became a fan of your company, honestly, and it's Box to Box, right? Is UK-based, London-based company, which I became a fan of by watching the Formula One series on Netflix. And I'll tell you, I haven't been until recently a golf guy. I am a golf guy now, but I was always a car guy. I was a car guy from the time I was 10. You know, I was plotting. I could tell you how many days from the time I was 13, I started counting the days till I was going to be 16 to get my driver's license. And in fact, we used to have a racetrack here called Riverside Raceway, and I used to go down there all the time and watch the races and film the racers as a stringer photographer. I mean, nobody else was there doing what I was doing. And it was with me alone, silent camera, and rush back to the news. So I was car crazy. And so when your series came out, I started watching them, and I've seen every single one, of course. And now the last couple of years, I hate to dominate all about me, but just as the backstory, I never played golf in my life until 2 years ago. I was good at making fun of my brother, who was a golfer, a very good golfer. And I said, I don't get it. How could you do that? I mean, it's like, and you watch it on television? What could be more boring? And I didn't understand actually how terrific it is and how much fun it is. So let's take a look at the trailer.
Every year, all these guys fight for their career.
If you're going to be a professional golfer, you have to accept the fact that it's just going to be a wild ride.
You don't know what's going to happen. I might win 50 more times in my career. I might win 0. That's just the reality.
The PGA Tour consists of almost 50 tournaments a year. You win tournaments, you can make millions. You lose, you walk away with nothing.
I'm going to punch you in your ribs. You told me on Tuesday you're going to make $1 million.
You picked a hell of a year to start following the PGA Tour.
The highs are really high and the lows are really low, and live somewhere towards that top. You have a pretty phenomenal career.
Our first couple years together, he was winning left and right, but I do worry about the future.
You win 2 majors of your first 8 tries.
I want them all.
If you want to win a major, you got to have faith and trust in all parts of your game.
I would tell anyone that would listen that I was going to be the best golfer in the world.
That's all I want, just win. It's win or go home.
There is a power struggle going on in golf.
You've got this existential threat to the game of golf in the Saudi-backed league called Liv Golf.
They're throwing astronomical money at people, and everything's got a price, I guess.
I understand I'm going to get chipped for it, and I'm totally cool with that.
Straight up, are you going to live?
The PGA Tour is the best place to play golf, but the game needs to be pushed forward.
It's competition at the end of the day. They want to step on my throat, I want to step on theirs.
Don't worry about me, you just play your game, man. Shit's about to get fun.
Tell Joey to move his fucking cart.
I'm trying to get my big break, player.
You need to go to the putting green.
But anyway, tell me, so how did you guys, was this your idea, or was this Netflix idea, or the PGA, or how did this come about?
We actually came into the show sort of relatively late in the process. There was a producer who's one of the executive producers on it, a guy called Chad Mumm, and I give Chad a lot of kind of credit. He for a long time he's a massive golf fan, and a very good golfer, and for a long time Chad, even predating Drive to Survive, had wanted to make a documentary series about the PGA and life on the PGA and behind the scenes of some of the golfers, and had always met, like a lot of sports, met a kind of resistance and skepticism about whether it could be done, whether people wanted to see something like that, whether players would really participate in it. And I think it was the success of kind of Drive to Survive, which for a lot of sports, just gave them a kind of a North Star of what could possibly be done in this world. And I think it was probably after about season 2 or season 3 of Drive to Survive that Chad realized that they were a lot more receptive to the idea of doing a show like this. And Chad managed to bring Netflix on board, and probably about 6 months before we started filming, Netflix kind of reached out to us and said, look, these shows are hard. They're very, they're a lot more difficult to make than people think. Would you guys think about coming on board this, working with Chad and his company and trying to bring this thing to life? And James and I happened to be in LA at that time, and we went for dinner with Chad and a golf agent, Chris Armstrong, and I wasn't a massive golf fan. I played a little bit when I was younger, but I was terrible. I'd watch a little bit on TV, but mainly the Masters or the Open or the Ryder Cup. I wasn't really interested in the sort of the day-to-day, week-to-week kind of tournaments. So I'll be honest with you, James and I were a little bit skeptical about, was it something we wanted to get involved in? Was it something that was even that interesting? And, we spoke to Chad and Chris and had a really nice dinner, and then came away and we were like, well, listen, they're good guys. Let's find out. Let's spend a little bit of time in that world. And so we did. And then I made a trip over to the Bahamas where there was a tournament going on, just to start to meet some of the golfers and start to, just kind of feel out whether they really wanted to be a kind of a part of this show. And I came out of that trip and I was slightly, my perception of golf just had dramatically changed on that trip. The golfers were much cooler, much more interesting than I expected them to be, and really open about, the struggles of being a professional golfer and really what it takes and what it's all about. And so it was really after that trip that we were convinced that there was something to be done in this space that it was going to be really interesting and that would hopefully find an audience.
I'm a filmmaker too. My brother's a golfer, and when I became interested in golf, literally just a couple of years ago, he started bugging me about, why don't you do a show about the PGA and the golfers? And I said, yeah, that's a great idea, but I don't even know anybody at the PGA, and I don't know, you're never going to sell a golf show. I mean, Drive to Survive, you've got guys doing, how fast are they going? I don't know, 150, 70 miles an hour, and it's life or death, and cars are crashing, and the guys are making a lot of money and very interesting, and they're in the prime of their life, and there's so much going on. And when I saw in the trades, I don't know when, 6 months ago or whatever it was, that your company was doing, it was like a bell went off, and I realized, these are the perfect people to do this show, because, and I've seen all 8 episodes. Okay. I've watched every episode, and they're every bit as dramatic and actually more emotional. Yeah, they're not driving 100 miles an hour, and they're not going to crash into a wall, but they could be crashing into an emotional wall or life decisions. I'm really glad, by the way, that you didn't shy away from the Liv Golf controversy story. because that is a revolution that's going through the golf core right now. You want to talk a little bit about that and how did you have to tiptoe around it, or did you just go into it, or what?
I think we couldn't ignore it. Is the honest, truth of it. I think, when we started the show, there were rumors going around that that this thing was going to happen, but people started to say, look, every few years someone comes around and they're going to disrupt golf and they're going to throw money at people, and it never really comes to anything. But I think, a few weeks into, we started production, I think it became evident that this thing was gaining some momentum, and that even if it wasn't going to manifest itself, everybody was talking about it. And you'd go to a tournament and everyone was, looking over their shoulder of who's being offered contracts, who might go, who might stay. And it just became this, for us as kind of, filmmakers, it was just irresistible. You couldn't stay away from it, because it just gave this level of conflict that doesn't really happen in golf, that where, people that had played alongside each other for, 20 years and were friends were suddenly at odds, were suddenly fighting in the press, were suddenly, not wanting to, do press conferences with each other and things like that. So, our show was very much done with the PGA and was done in partnership with the PGA. But there came a point where we had to go to the PGA and say, listen, if we can't cover Liv, and you're not okay with us covering Liv, I don't think we've got a show, because even the players that are not going, it's affecting their day to day, because they're being asked questions about it. They're probably being offered contracts as well. So we've just got to cover it in some way. And, I give Jay Monahan and the PGA a lot of credit as well, as that they didn't shy away from that. They understood that we were there to document this year, and Liv Golf, whether they liked it or not, was a huge part of the year. And it just continued to build and build.
I got to give credit too, I think, to the PGA. At the end of the day, they have to look at this show and say, they couldn't have made a better show for them, because it shows, the conflict, the drama, the emotions, and the hardships, and the wins and the losses. But it shows this really is a fantastic sport. No matter what happens with Liv and PGA, I don't know. But I think at the end of the day, it's really a good thing for the PGA and the people that mostly the people that you featured. It's sad to see some of them, switching sides.
Yeah.
At the end of the day. We have a lot of filmmakers that watch this series, and as a filmmaker myself, I'm very interested in the logistics involved of how did you shoot this show? How many teams did you have on? How much did you have access to all the TV that was already being shot for CBS or NBC or the Golf Channel and that sort of thing? What can you give us some of the details of the filmmaking?
It was a challenge. I think every time you go into these sporting kind of environments, the footage and how to get the coverage is always a massive challenge. And and I think the more we do of these, the more we realize how spoiled we are in Formula One, because Formula One take every single one of their camera feeds, they ingest it, they log it, it's digitized. You can literally go into the Formula One archive and find every single camera from every single race over the last however many years. And what we realize is that's not the same in every sport. It's sort of golf, although they have a ton of cameras in and around the course, they sort of come into the broadcast truck, but they're never archived or digitized. They're just kind of washed away. And so, it took us a while to figure out how we were going to cover the golf, because we don't have endless crews that can follow, 10 golfers at a particular event across every hole. We have pretty small footprints, really, sort of 2-3 man crews, probably, 3 of those at most at a particular event. So, we're there to be focused on the stuff away from the course. And we had to rely on, a combination of NBC, of CBS, of Hawkeye, the system that they have to track the golf balls to enable us to really cover the event in the way that we wanted to. So it was, it was a challenge. The amazing thing was how the whole world of golf helped us. CBS didn't kind of say, hey, listen, this is a Netflix show, this has nothing to do with us, figure it out yourselves. Same as NBC. All those guys understood that, look, if we do this properly, everyone's going to benefit from it. The whole game of golf's going to benefit from it.
That's so true, because there's, just like I think the interest in Formula One probably went through the roof when your series was on Netflix. I think more people are going to be interested in golf, and you're bringing all the best personalities. When you have, Rory and McIlroy and Tony Finau and Colin Morikawa. I mean, all these guys are just great. And the more I see about them, the more I know about them, the more I'm, cheering for this guy or that guy. So you're right. It's in their best interest. I was wondering, I would love to have a camera in the room, though, at CBS or NBC or Golf Channel when your show first came up, and what people, the pros and the cons and what they might have said. That would.
Yeah. I think Drive to Survive, I think Drive to Survive, just the impact of that show just radically changed the conversation around these type of shows. I mean, we had a similar thing when we started Drive to Survive, whereby, because there'd been nothing like it, we had, Sky and ESPN and the traditional broadcasters who'd shown the live broadcast, they were pretty upset that Formula One were doing this thing with Netflix, because they didn't. And to be honest, we didn't understand that it was going to have this impact where it was going to come out and it was just going to have a halo effect around the whole of the sport. Whereas actually, if you're Sky, you're the Sky in the UK, you're one of the biggest benefits of that show. Because if someone comes to Formula One, has never seen a race before, wants to see a race on a Sunday, the only place they can go is Sky. So suddenly Sky's viewership went up, ESPN's viewership went up. And because people had started to talk about that, and that was kind of known, it just made those conversations with NBC and CBS and those guys so much easier, because they could say, well, look, if these guys do get it right, we are going to be the beneficiaries of it. So we might as well try and help them to make it the best show possible. And I think it's, that is the power of Drive to Survive. It has radically changed the conversation around doing these type of shows and made these type of shows so much easier to get off the ground.
So I'll tell you what the next one should be, in my opinion.
Go on.
It's so obvious. It's the Tour de France.
We're just finishing that at the moment for Netflix.
Really?
Yeah.
You already did.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't surprise me at all. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And I used to be a big cycling fan, and I watched the Tour. Literally watched the Tour. I've not only rode bikes for years, but I was obsessed with all that stuff. Well, I'm really glad to hear that, because the American audience actually needs a show like this to explain what the Tour de France really is, because they haven't done a very good job. And I don't think they do a great job on what's now called, on the Golf Channel, the NBC, whatever it's called now. That was the channel where the Tour was on all the time.
Yeah.
They have it online, and they have cameras on the motorcycles, and all that stuff. But if you're not really a cyclist, I mean, they don't tell you how fast they're going. They don't tell you what the altitude is. They don't tell you what the temperature is, what the heartbeat, the power rate, and all this stuff. They don't explain, and I'm sure most people don't understand it at all. Formula One, you can understand, a bunch of cars running around, and someone's going to win. But the Tour is such a unique.
Yeah,
that's good to hear.
Yeah, I mean that's been a logistical challenge. Trying to pull that one.
Oh, well, it's got to be very, very tough, because you're not in the same place any 2 days in a row. You're moving everybody, right, and everything.
Yeah.
But you didn't really answer my question about the logistics. How much of the show would you say, roughly, if this is a fair question, of your series is from NBC, CBS, or the Golf Channel?
Oh, a relatively low percentage, I would say. It's just those moments where, it's just the on-course coverage. So a lot of the shots. I think every time you see a player kind of a shot in anger, it's probably a CBS or an NBC or, or Golf Channel, wherever it came from. We'd have some cameras following select groups. For instance, when Matt Fitzpatrick wins the US Open, I was lucky enough to walk that entire 18 holes with him and our camera crew, and we were there and we were filming his mum and dad, at the time. So all that stuff is us. It just is, probably, off the top of my head, I would say 75, 80% us, 20% the
What
other
about
stuff.
the Joel Dahman episode was so terrific, and he seemed to come out of nowhere, and even he didn't believe what was happening, right? And you were there. I mean,
yeah. I mean, Joel was a character that we liked from kind of day one, but you sort of, the challenge with these shows sometimes is you need that perfect combination of, you need a character, but you do need a kind of a sporting payoff somewhere along the line. You need to be able to land these narratives in the sport somewhere. And so the challenge with Joel was always going to be, by his own admission, someone's got to be the 70th best golfer in the world, and why not me? And do you know what? I'm fine with it. Joel was a great character, but we were always like, but where's his moment going to be across the year? And, and he just had this, he had this amazing kind of run at the US Open where I think he finished kind of top 5, but his journey to get there had been pretty spectacular. And it's, it's the perfect kind of, these shows work perfectly when you have those great personalities with just a moment that you can land it in, that gives you that drama and gives you that kind of payoff. And with Joel, we were lucky enough that we got one, because he was a great character for us, but we worried about the golf payoff, if that makes sense.
Well, it certainly paid off. I thought it was a very powerful episode. What do you think the shooting ratio was? If you have 8 hours on the air right now, how many hours of film / video do you think you actually might have shot? Any?
I honestly, I almost dread to think. I think that we you just have to, because at the heart of these shows is something that we're never in control of. Like you know what it's like to be a filmmaker. You want to be in control of absolutely everything that you can, and at the heart of these shows is a living, breathing thing that has a mind of its own and throws up the most unexpected curveballs at all times, which is the sport side of it. So we always are trying to sort of second guess the sport. We're always trying to stay ahead of it, but ultimately, like I say, you just can't control it. So you have to have a plan A, plan B, plan C at all times, and then probably more plans than that. So we're constantly chasing stories that we think might pay off and we hope will pay off, and some do and some don't, and that's the challenge with these shows of making sure you have enough coverage so that you don't the edit and you're just like, well, what are we doing with this?
So would you guess that it's 100 hours per hour or 50 or don't know?
I honestly don't know.
How about the editing? What was the length of time, the average hour show? How many edit weeks or months would you say the edit was?
So I think that probably, on these shows, across all the shows, it's probably somewhere around 16, 17 weeks an episode. You start off thinking, oh, we'll do it in 12, 13 weeks. But inevitably it just, I think we've had some fun discussions with Netflix where, we've got into shows where, they obviously want you to do it quicker, but, it inevitably ends up, to get the best version of it, they're tricky. They're tricky shows to put together. And I think what we've realized is probably, although people would like it to be closer to 10, 12 weeks, it's always closer to, 16, 17, 18 weeks.
And how much was Netflix involved in terms of notes or editorial decisions?
I think Netflix are very, they're just very collaborative to work with, honestly. They are, they have they have their opinions on stuff, as all kind of networks do, but they're very user friendly. You know, they're very trusting. I think they're very trusting of us. You know, we've done a few shows for them now, so you know, hopefully, you know, we've earned that kind of trust to be able to sort of make the shows that we want to make. But you know, I don't think there's any of our Netflix shows that I look at that I think, oh, they made us put that in, or they wanted us to take that out. It just doesn't really work like that. They're incredible to work with, and we enjoy having their kind of executives as part of the process. Honestly,
what was the most difficult part of making this show?
I think in the beginning, I think that golfers are a certain personality type, I would say, and they've also got a lot of money, and so they're maybe not as malleable as other sports people. You know, they don't necessarily, you know, they don't do things. I guess they didn't really, in terms of other sports, they didn't really see the immediate kind of benefit from it. You know, they've all got a gazillion dollars in the bank. They all live in massive houses in Jupiter or Scottsdale, Arizona. So they're part of like, well, what's really the upside for us? You know, we're already doing all right. You know, it doesn't, you know, and so it was more so than, you know, even on tennis, you know, tennis, I think there's not as much money in tennis as people think. And so I think tennis players gave us much better access from a much earlier point. So we had to work really, really, really hard to get some of the golfers on board. But when they did, the access really, really opened up. But it was challenging in the beginning. I have to say, one of the most challenging shows to sort of break through on. You know, normally you hope that you do it a little bit quicker, but with golf, it took us a while.
It's, you know, it's the one thing that you don't talk about too much. Although I love the fact that you put down the amount of money that somebody came in when they came in, you know, fifth or sixth or something, and it's like, you know, $642,000. You know, they're disappointed he only made $600,000 for that week, and it was one of the other golfers. Was it? I think it was Brooks Koepka, or maybe it was. It was what's his name with the pants. You know, you were inside his closet, and it was like something at Nordstrom. He had every single pair of pants that was. I mean, and that was just the pants, you know, and that was just the golf pants. And then you realize, and then you had a stat, I think, that said that over 20 years he had made $33 million. And you think, you do the math quickly and you realize, oh my, you know, he had a bad year. He only made $1 million or 600,000, right? So I'm surprised in a way that they are as laid back and have a beer and as casual, and you really did get the access. You were right there in the locker room or in the restaurant with them or wherever, right? I mean,
yeah, no, we did, and I think the money thing, you know, that you know, putting the money up, in some ways, you know, I was watching the show, you know, at home over the weekend as well, and you know, it is amazing where I think I can't remember who it is. I think it's like one of the golfers, he wins, you know, 300,000, and he's crying like a baby because he hasn't won the tournament. And I think I think we put the money in there to show, like, yeah, they do earn extraordinary amounts of money, but that's not what it's about for them. And you see that in that moment. You know, if I won $300,000, wherever I finished in a tournament, I'd be running around, probably with my top off, celebrating. You know, it's like $300,000. But for them, it gets to a point where it genuinely is not about the money, even though they earn huge amounts of money. It is, you know, it goes to the point that you said about one of the challenges that we thought about with this show was what you said about the difference between Formula One and golf, in that Formula One genuinely is life and death. You know, people die, people get injured, people really get, and golf isn't. And so we were like, well, where are those stakes, and where is that kind of life and death in this sport? And it was actually Sean Foley, who's in the show, said to me when on that first trip in the Bahamas, and it was probably this conversation that convinced me to do the show, was he said, but the thing you have to remember, for these guys, that golf swing is life and death for them. It's given them everything they've got in their life. It's defined who they are as a person. It's been responsible for every friendship they've ever had, every positive relationship they've ever had in their life. And so when it goes wrong, and when they can't figure out why that golf swing's gone to pot, it's their whole life that crumbles. It's not just I hit a bad shot, it becomes life and death for them. And that just stayed with me for the whole show. And I think, it's so true, is that although it appears to us to be, just a golf swing and being good at golf, for those guys, that's their whole life, and that's what defines them. And that's why when it goes wrong, they're so emotional about it.
Can you tell me a little bit about your background and how you came to be one of the producers of this show? Did you go to film school, or were you a PA, or what did you do to
No, I had
get where you are?
I had a relatively convoluted kind of route. I actually was a sports journalist for a bit, print, and it just was never something that, I sort of don't know really why I got into it, because I love sport, because I loved kind of storytelling, but it wasn't, print journalism just wasn't for me. So then I did a bunch of stuff, and I eventually started to make game shows. So I made a lot of game shows, and actually lived over here, worked for the Game Show Network, and then went back to the UK and just didn't want to do game shows anymore. So I'd always wanted to make documentaries, and was interested in documentaries and kind of film, and so I guess I thought, well, it's quite a transition from kind of game show to documentary. What can I kind of lean on that sort of gives me an edge, or allows me to sort of make that transition? And I still had a lot of contacts on sport. I still knew a lot of people within the sports world, so I sort of lent on that. And I mean, this sounds very easy, but I managed to convince Cristiano Ronaldo to let us make a film about him, which we made for Universal. And then I'd optioned a book about Diego Maradona, which we turned into the Maradona doc. And so it was really just kind of going back to actually what I knew and what I loved, which was sport. And I'd always been such a great consumer of amazing, literature about sport, whether it was Hunter S. Thompson, whether it was Norman Mailer's The Fight. I loved that. And I always felt that actually, apart from kind of Senna, apart from kind of When We Were Kings, that hadn't really translated into, the genre of kind of documentary. And so, it was really trying to bring that premium, that authored kind of idea from sport into kind of documentary. And, and that was really my way into where we are now.
Usually on these, most of the shows that I've done episodes on are on documentaries, and usually I interview the director, and I noticed there's no director credit on this show. It's all producers. What's the thinking behind that, if I might ask?
I think we, in the UK, we have that role, kind of producer director. So our directors, we do have directors in the sense of, we have guys with cameras out in the field, building kind of scenes and that kind of stuff. But they're called kind of PDs in the UK. And just because it's very difficult for someone with a kind of a singular kind of vision to come in and, and really direct these shows in the traditional directing sense, So I think that it's very much more, you're relying on those PDs to not only be, directing, but also maintaining the relationships, working with the players, with the agents. And so, I think that these shows just don't really lend themselves to those sort of, here's a singular, director that's going to have the vision for the entire show and be across it. It's just not logistically possible. So it's just the way that we've gone about it. I mean, we do use, on some of on some of these series, we use high-end DOPs, producer directors, but we've just never done them with a singular kind of director.
So would there like a half a dozen producers or producer directors that were, one guy is covering Koepka and one guy is covering Rory and somebody is covering something else?
Yeah, so that sort of tends to be how it works.
Can you tell me any other shows? What are you working on in the future beside the tour, which is a slam dunk natural?
So the tour, we're just finishing. We're finishing up a couple of things at the moment. Some sport, some non-sport. I can't remember what's kind of out there and what's not. I think we're doing a big 4-part non-sport series for Apple at the moment. We've just finished something for Showtime, although I don't know what's going to happen with that, with everything that's going on. And finishing a 3-part for ESPN, which is kind of sport, but not sport, if that makes any sense. And then more Drive to Survive, and then hopefully, more of some of these other shows.
How big is Box to Box? How many full-time employees do you have?
So we've got about 40 now, 40 full-time.
In London?
In London, and then, we've got just started the LA office, late last year, so starting to build that up.
Well, I just want to say, whatever Netflix paid, they certainly got their money's worth. And for me, as a late comer to golf, and I must say now, the secret is coming out. I am obsessed with golf now. But this was, I don't think you have to be obsessed with golf to be thoroughly entertained and enjoyed this show. And, it's very emotional. I mean, I think, people that have never been on a golf course could sit down and I think it will be the best thing that's happened to golf in a long time. So congratulations and thanks so much for being on the show.
No, thanks, Chuck. Thanks for having me.